From legendary teams like the Mounties and the Asahi, baseball has long been a part of the fabric of Vancouver and indeed British Columbia. Now comes a new book that celebrates that legacy from BC's first recorded baseball game in 1863 to today's Vancouver Canadians. Here to talk about play ball, the amazing stories and captivating characters who have made baseball a winning ticket in Vancouver for over 100 years is Tom Hawthorn. First of all, how did this book come to be?
Well, the owners of the Vancouver Canadians had been planning to get out of the sell the team after owning it for over a decade and having revived baseball. Jake Kerr had it in his mind that he wanted to create a legacy, both of their ownership and of the history of baseball in the city. And so he has essentially commissioned this book. I was asked to do the writing. I'd been covering my first story about Vancouver baseball was in 1979 when I interviewed when I was 19, I interviewed a young rookie named Buster Keaton. Buster, of course, a nickname, who was a pitcher for the Canadians. And I wanted to ask him what it was like to be on his first baseball card. And that's the very first story I did. So I was selected to do the writing on the book, and we've put together this incredible collection of photographs and images, both from the archives, both the City of Vancouver archives and some provincial archives, but especially the magical images. There are pictures in here from private collections that people have never seen. So it's just a wonderful legacy for sports fans in Vancouver.
It really seems like a love letter commissioned by Jake Kerr and Jeff Mooney, who, as you mentioned, owned the club from 2007 until 2023. I also can't not mention the forward written by Jim Robson, who called baseball games on our station, CKWX, back in the 1960s.
Yeah, Jim was he's seen it all. He's covered the Mounties back in the 50s and into the early 60s. Anybody of that generation I talk to about baseball, they always talk about Jim Robson. One of the things he had to do back in the day is they wouldn't send him as an announcer to cover the road games. So they would get the ticker tape of the game and recreate the atmosphere and the sound in the studio, which entertained listeners. We might not think that's an entirely the right way to approach it, but it was very popular. And Jim's such a wonderful man. He's in his 90s now. He has just a razor sharp memory. He would tell stories, and I'd go look up the dates, and he'd had them all right. Wonderful man.
Take us back to the beginning, if you can. As mentioned, the first recorded baseball game in BC was in Victoria in 1863. And the way you tell it, the game was brought over by gold miners, most of them from the U.S., who arrived here by boat from San Francisco.
Yes, that's right. So this was in the colony of Vancouver Island, Victoria, the sport would have been cricket is what they would have played. And then when these Americans were coming up for gold rush or merchants and all the rest, they brought up this newfangled stick and ball game called they called baseball. In those days, spelled as two words. The Daily Colonist, the big newspaper in the colony, wanted to assure the British public that this game was nothing as good as cricket and probably wouldn't last. But certainly they played the first games up at Beacon Hill. People would ride their horses out to Beacon Hill Park on the flatlands. There's still there's soccer pitches there now, but some softball is still played on the very grounds that the first baseball games were played here. And then, of course, the game spread through the miners into these various mining communities throughout British Columbia. And some of these boom and bust gold rush and tin rush towns would form ball teams, and they would mostly in those days it was amateur, but money would be slipped under the table to try and get especially a pitcher to come play for your team.
Now, we fast forward to the spring of 1887 when Al Larwill forms Vancouver's first baseball team on the Cambie Street grounds, as they were called, at the corner of Cambie and Dunsmuir. What's his legacy?
Well, Al Larwell is kind of a forgotten guy these days. He was, he was a single man, a bachelor. He essentially squatted on that square when the city of Vancouver was being formed. They looked around for a city block that would be designated for recreational and sporting events. They tried Stanley Park. They liked Brockton Point, but at the time you had to take a boat to get over there. It was hard to get through. You couldn't get through the forest. They were thinking of where the courthouse is now was the other place that they thought maybe we should have the old courthouse, I should say, now the art gallery. They thought that could be the place, and they eventually settled on this square and where the old bus. When I moved to Vancouver, that was the bus depot, and still sometimes people called it Larwell Park, although it hasn't been a park in a long time. And so they took that Square City block, which was from owned by the Canadian Pacific. They rented it off Canadian Pacific and eventually was deeded to the city. Larwell put up a squatter shack there in his squatter shack in which he lived. But then he also let the sports teams use his shack as a place to store their equipment so they wouldn't have to schlep it home. And it kind of became a hangout, and lots of sports were played on that ground, including some lacrosse, but baseball was popular there. It was really more used as a marching ground. So military units would parade there on the Queen's birthday and things like that. But that is the first real site for baseball in Vancouver.
And I guess if you didn't mention it already, the future site of the Vancouver Art Gallery is where they're going to put it.
That's right. Yeah.
The boom years of Vancouver baseball, as you put it, were 1923 to 1955. One of the great stories in the book, it's a sad story too, is the Asahi, one of the city's most dominant amateur teams, made up primarily of Japanese Canadian players. And what were they best known for?
Well, they were best known for their style of play, as you can imagine. So this was a team that was formed. There had been race riots in Vancouver early in the 20th century. The Japanese Canadian community had banded together to prevent the rioters from torching their neighborhood. And in banding together, they also decided, well, how can we integrate with the larger community? And they formed a baseball club. Baseball, very popular in Japan even then, continues to be popular today. So they formed a club called the Asahi, which had farm teams throughout the city as well. And it became the real personification and expression of the Japanese Canadian community to what we know as Oppenheimer Park. And over time gathered a following amongst all baseball fans in Vancouver. So they were smaller physically, these Japanese Canadians, and they developed a game of play called brain ball, where they relied on speed and defense and pitching and bunting. I've actually found at least two games that the Asahi won in which they never recorded a hit. So a batter might walk to first, he'd be sacrificed to second, steal third, and sacrificed home. And they ended up winning those games. And that style of play, the skill they showed in defense, the speed on the base paths, and just kind of clever baseball playing won them admiration and fans throughout the city of Vancouver.
And sadly, the team was broken up by the internment of Japanese Canadians, and they never played another game, but at least they're remembered now.
That's right. So what happens is Imperial Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. Canada goes to war, as does the United States. The next spring, the Japanese Canadian community is forced from the city, ordered away from the coast, now seen as one of the great travesties of Canadian civil liberties. All those people were ordered to put all their belongings in a suitcase and forced into internment camps mostly in the interior of British Columbia. One thing about the Asahi players, they brought their baseball equipment with them. It's one of the most touching things that I've found in researching. So Ken Katsukake, who was the number one catcher for the team, put his shin guards and his catcher's mask and his catcher's glove in his suitcase, probably not leaving much room for anything else. And in these internment camps, they lobbied, essentially the RCMP were guarding them. They eventually lobbied the RCMP to allow them to play sports, allow them to play softball. And in Kamloops, Kaminishi convinced the RCMP to allow them to play the white amateur team in Kamloops, and so Kei Kaminishi led the walk. They had to walk from their internment camp into Kamloops to play this game, crossing the bridge. And essentially, this is during the war. They're still interned, and it was seen as a real it was an acknowledgement by the HB. These people aren't a threat. They're civilians. There's been no sabotage or anything. And it's a real a tribute to their love of baseball that these Asahi members continued playing, even in the darkest days.
Now the we have various teams in Vancouver over the years, the Mounties, the Capellanos, but the modern era of the Vancouver Canadians starts in 1978 when Harry Ornest is granted an expansion franchise, and the old Capilano Stadium becomes Nat Bailey Stadium. Where do we go from there? That kind of sets us up quite nicely for baseball of today.
Yeah. So again, if I could just share a personal story, I
Yeah.
moved to Vancouver in 1977. As a boy, I lived in Montreal when the Expos arrived, and that's when I fell in love with baseball. And I moved to Vancouver in 77. There was no pro team here, but the very next year, Harry Ornest brings in a pro team, and the year after that, I'm a 19-year-old Cub reporter, and I went down to the stadium to interview a pitcher named Buster Keaton because the Canadians had issued their first set of baseball cards, and I wanted to ask him what it was like to appear on a baseball card. So the Canadians they were a triple A team, one, and those years from 78 to 2000, they were one level below the major leagues. Tickets were very affordable and inexpensive. Not many people went to some of those games. I have memories of going with my friends in the early 80s. The weather was very cold. Vancouver's not really made for April or May baseball, sometimes not even in January. The crowds weren't huge, which was one of the problems that affected the Mounties as well. But the level of play was extraordinary. And then that team left, and then the start of this century, it was a lower level of baseball, and the team staggered along. And really, when Jeff Mooney and Jake Kerr got the team, they revived baseball. They fixed up Nat Bailey Stadium, which had really fallen on hard times and was, I can remember how decrepit it was inside and seemed to be falling apart. Really needed a paint job. The food options were terrible. And as anybody who's been to Nat Bailey in the last 15 years knows, what a magnificent, beautiful place to watch baseball. I've been to many major league parks and many minor league parks, and I'm never happier than when I'm at Nat Bailey. Just a wonderful facility.
Now, just before the start of the 2023 season, the Canadians were sold to Diamond Baseball Holdings, an American sports ownership and management group. Where do you see the team headed from there?
Well, this is so what's happened to the minor leagues, which used to be an absolute hodgepodge of crazy owners and crazy promotions and players that were there and then not there. It's kind of become professionalized. Major League Baseball has wants much better organization in the minor league system. After all, these are the players you see playing for the Vancouver Canadians today are possibly future Toronto Blue Jays. And so they really wanted a high level of professionalism throughout the minor leagues. So this is an American company that does a good job of maintaining facilities and having high standards and protecting the players. But we've lost a little bit of the idiosyncrasies that made minor league baseball so crazy and fun. But it's still a wonderful place to watch a game.
Fair to say the future of pro baseball in Vancouver is stable and in good hands?
It is stable and in good hands. It remains the last professional baseball franchise that's associated with the major leagues in that way. Canada used to have a ton. There were teams in Ottawa, Calgary, and Edmonton, but Vancouver is the last one, and it is a really terrific opportunity to see future. I mean, if you go to the next Vancouver Canadians game, people on that field will be future major leaguers.
Well, just as an aside, there's been some notable names who have put on the Canadian sweater. just off the top of my head, Sammy Sosa, Kelly Gruber, Larry Walker Jr., just to name a few.
Yeah, Rich Harden was one of my favorites. I covered Rich here when I was lived in Victoria. I covered him when he was a high school student, and he had just got drafted. He ended up playing for the Oakland Athletics. There's a long list. It's in the book. There's some surprising people that you forget that had played in Vancouver. Sammy Sosa is one of my favorite trivia questions about it, which is funny to me because. Sammy Sosa, we remember as a home run hitter in the majors. May have been, he had some PED assistance in that, and so is not as well regarded as he was. But Nat Bailey is infamously a terrible home run ballpark. And in my research, I also found when the Vancouver Mounties were a Kansas City A's team, there was a thought that Reggie Jackson might have come here in the mid 60s. And I'm kind of glad for him he didn't. He jumped from double A into the majors because he would have had, even Reggie Jackson would have had a hard time hitting home runs. Nat Bailey Stadium is almost at sea level. So the air is heavier and the ball does not sail as far. Not a home run park.
So many great stories in this book, so many great characters. What do you hope folks get out of Play Ball?
Well, I'll tell you one of the things and one of the reasons Jake asked me to write the book was I've spent my adult life with a partner who she thinks baseball's too long by at least 6 innings. So my thought was, how do we write a book that for the non-baseball fan that also satisfies the baseball fan? And that was our approach in this. There's lots of quirky little stories. One of which is about a guy that failed to make the Mounties and then went on to become one of the greatest all-time professional bowlers of all things. And so that's the intent of the book is that anybody can just pick it up, leaf through it, enjoy the photographs, and if you find a little story that makes you laugh or entertains you or informs you, then we've done the job we set out to do.
It's a fine place to leave it. The name of the book is Play Ball, the amazing stories and captivating characters who've made baseball a winning ticket in Vancouver for over 100 years. It is published by Echo Storytelling Agency, with all proceeds going to the BC Sports Hall of Fame. My thanks to author Tom Hawthorn.
Thanks, John.